2024. President Trump and his family were together in Florida awaiting the election results after one of the most brutal campaigns in American history. 4 years earlier, President Trump had been forced to leave the White House after rampant voter fraud had resulted in Joe Biden being elected president. In 2022, President Trump announced he would run again in 2024, much to the Democrats' dismay. The mainstream media went into full meltdown, claiming it was impossible for President Trump to return to the White House. During Trump's campaign, he was shot live on television, arrested on made-up charges, and even had his home raided by the FBI. But he was still standing and determined as ever to get back to the White House and finish what he had started. Thankfully, 77 million people, Americans, agreed, helping President Trump win both the Electoral College and the popular vote. Americans also gave Republicans control of the House and Senate to help President Trump accomplish his agenda. This historic victory on November the 5th, 2024 wasn't just about President Trump, however. It was also a rejection of the Democrats' ridiculous open border policies that had allowed tens of millions of illegals to come into our country unvetted. It was a rejection of the sky-high inflation that made life unaffordable for millions and millions of Americans. It was a rejection of the woke policies, like men and women's sports, allowing to perform life-ruining surgeries on children. And it was a rejection of the weaponization of the federal government to go after political opponents. November the 5th, 2024 was one of the most consequential elections of my lifetime. It paved the way for Republicans in the House and the Senate to deliver historic tax cuts. Just last summer, with popular cuts to Social Security, tips, and overtime. We look forward to seeing all those policies take effect this year, but we still have much work to do. There's been a lot of talk in the media about what Republicans need to focus on into the midterms later this year. A lot of talk. If you ask me, the number one issue must be securing our elections. If we don't deliver on this, we will lose our country to the woke globalists who hate our Constitution and want to destroy the greatest nation on earth. It's far past time for my Republican colleagues in the Senate to stop worrying about getting reelected and pass one of the most critical pieces of legislation that we will see in our lifetime, the Save America Act. The Save America Act is most important. It requires voters to show a government ID to vote in federal elections. What a thought. This is common sense, which is, by the way, 83% of all Americans, they support it, according to a 2025 poll just a few weeks ago. There is bipartisan support for it. 95% of Republicans and 71% of Democrats across this country agree that a photo ID should be used in all of our elections. Interestingly, the support also transcends demographics among American citizens. 82% of Latino voters, 76% of black voters, 85% of white voters favor photo ID. This really isn't complicated. The Save America Act also requires proof of citizenship for an individual to register in your state. If you are here illegally, you should not be voting in our elections, period. Lastly, the bill requires states to remove non-U.S. citizens from existing voter rolls. It makes sense. These policies, they're not controversial, yet the Democratic Party is throwing a tantrum. You should be asking yourself, why is that? Why are they against voter ID? No mail-in ballots, no ballot harvesting, and one-day voting. Why is that? Is it because their illegal voting base will no longer be able to keep them in power once the legislation becomes law? Sure it is. Democrats claim the Save America Act is a voter suppression. It's racist, but the American people, they're not falling for it. Don't believe the mainstream media's portrayal of this. The American people have already spoken. The Save America Act is a huge majority of Americans, and they want it. There are many things in our day-to-day lives that require us to show a government photo ID. Many things, almost everything. Purchasing alcohol, lottery tickets, tobacco products, boarding flights, renting a car, checking into hotels. If you want to open up a bank account or apply for credit, you must show a photo ID. Marriage license, signing legal documents. Many other benefit programs often require proof of identification as well. Not to mention, my Democrat colleagues in the Senate are supporting ICE agents to prove their identities while deporting criminals. Let federal law enforcement agents do their job, folks. Let them do their job. The hypocrisy from the radical left knows no bounds. Ask yourself, why is it easier to vote than it is to board a plane? Makes no sense. Why are Republican politicians in Washington ignoring the mandate of 77 million American patriots? 77 million voted to get this done. Washington, D.C., we got problems where elected officials are completely out of touch and they don't listen to the people they represent. They vote for themselves, and that's gotten us in trouble. They're more concerned about getting reelected than actually doing what they promised to do on the campaign trail. It's easy to talk, but you need to follow up on what you ran on. For years, Democrats have shouted from the rooftops that it is impossible for illegals to vote in our elections, but the proof is in the pudding. August 2024, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, he announced that they found more than 1 million ineligible voters on the Texas voter rolls. 1 million. In October 2024, the Supreme Court of the United States approved the state of Virginia to remove 1,600 ineligible voters from the voter rolls. Had to be forced to do it. Earlier this year, Oregon was forced to begin removing 800,000 inactive voters from the state registration rolls. Why do they have to be told to do that? It doesn't make any sense. This is not a coincidence. It is an intentional political strategy being orchestrated by the Democratic National Party. Democrats, they've lost their traditional blue-collar and minority voter base. How do we know that? Majority of them just voted for President Trump just a year ago. Because of that, the Democrats have now found themselves a new girlfriend. Who are they? Illegal immigrants. That's why the Democrat-controlled states refuse to work with the Department of Justice and have denied the agency access to the voting rolls. Denied the federal government, oh, you can't see our voting rolls. What do you got to hide? They'd rather fall on their swords for criminal illegal aliens, murderers, rapists, and terrorists to get their votes than prioritize the safety of American citizens. Thanks to the Director of National Intelligence, Director Tulsi Gabbard, Americans are finally seeing evidence of the past fraudulent elections come to light. Millions of Americans have thought for years that there was serious election interference in Fulton County, Georgia during the 2020 presidential election. Thanks to President Trump, FBI Director Kash Patel, and DNI Tulsi Gabbard, the 2020 presidential election ballots have been seized and will soon reveal the real truth to the American people. The Save America Act must be our main priority this year. And that's saying a whole lot because we have got a lot of problems up here, but it's got to be our #1 priority. For instance, Washington, D.C. has a serious spending problem. You know, we're more than $38 trillion in debt with nothing to show for it. Or look at the fact that we're one of the sickest countries on earth. Thank God for RFK Jr. and Make America Healthy Again movement. We are working to address this problem. Not to mention all the problems created by the Biden administration in their office for 4 years. but we can't even start addressing these problems until we pass the Save America Act. We have to do it. Luckily, we still have time to get it to the finish line. One way we can do this is to get rid of the outdated 60-vote filibuster. The way it is used today has nothing to do with what it was originally intended for. Instead of the zombie filibuster of today, it's become a tool of obstruction used to overturn the will of the American people. We don't work for the Senate. We work for the American people. The filibuster was set up to allow debate, and that should be happening right here. Real debate on this floor. My Democrat colleagues need to come to the floor and explain to the American people why they want illegals to vote in elections. I'd like to hear it. What's their reasoning? President Trump ran on the common sense policies of Save America Act, and he won also the popular vote, by the way. It's time my Republican colleagues started acting like we were in the majority. We have the power. As Republicans, we currently have 53 seats in the Senate. Clearly, the American people are behind us and support the American First agenda. That's exactly why 77 million people voted in 2024, and we owe it to each and every one of them to get the job done and just sit up here and look at each other. Passing legislation like the Save America Act is essential for the future of our country. We're not going to have another chance. We have no choice. We've got to get it done. If we do not pass this bill, we may never have a secure election in this country again. Never. That's a long time. Democrats will work overtime to import as many illegals to this country as they can. They just showed they'd do it for 4 months or 4 years. We can't allow that to happen again. We are seeing the Democrat strategy play out in real time in other countries as we speak. I've been saying this for years. All you got to do is go to Europe. They're us 10 years from now if we don't pass the Save America Act. It's gone. Their leaders are getting fired right and left. They've lost their moral values, they lost their culture, and they lost their country. All it started with mass migration, which they have allowed to completely destroy what they've had for centuries. The socialist-controlled Spanish government recently imported 500,000 migrants and are in the process of granting residency. You got to be kidding me. Or look at Romania, where the conservative pro-Romania First candidate was cheated out of a victory in 2024 because of made-up claims that Russia had interfered in their elections. Sounds familiar. If we don't pass the Save America Act this year, what's happening in Europe won't just be overseas anymore. It's going to be right here in our backyard because many of the enemy are already inside the gates. Politicians often warn about the crime or national security threats that illegals pose to this country, but this isn't just about American safety. It's also a serious financial problem. You know that every year now we're having to pay for the illegals that are in this country. It costs you and me and every taxpayer in this country $150 billion. What could we do with that money in our states, in our communities, in our neighborhoods? Folks, we have to take our country back. Our borders, we have to take it all back before it's too late. We must get rid of the Dominion voting machines, stop mail-in voting, absentee ballots only in certain situations, stop ballot harvesting, and return the same-day only voting. In my state of Alabama, I get two questions. Are you going to close the border, and are you going to have fair elections? I want my vote to count, and that's the reason I'm here today. If we don't secure our federal elections, we will become a banana republic. It is right around the corner. The American people want it. The only question is, do my colleagues in the Senate want to keep their tradition of the Senate, or do they want to work for the American people? That's the reason we're here. Are we just interested in protecting our own power? I hope not, because it won't be here long if we don't. Let's do the right thing for the American taxpayers and pass the Save America Act. Our nation and the future of our kids and grandkids depend on it. Think about it. I yield the floor, Mr. President. I notice the absence of a quorum.